What do you miss most about your sister?
I miss her little high energy self. Just her voice, how she is. I wish she was here so she can see my son.
Tell me about the group that your sister was hanging out with.
From what I hear, they were cool, but they also did extra activities at their house.
This couple, Orien and Tai Curry, were happy to start a new life when they moved to a new apartment in Atlanta Suburbs. But little did they know they were about to get the shock of their lives because this apartment held a dark secret.
There was all kind of trails of blood from the front door all the way through the dining room, all the way through the hallway where it stopped in our closet.
It was in this house that 18-year-old Honey Malone was murdered and dumped in the closet 7 years earlier.
I squirted the peroxide on the spot and it started foaming. That was blood.
There was a murder in our apartment.
Honey was said to have gone to that apartment that day to visit her friends, but the authorities said she walked in on a robbery and was murdered while she was trying to get away.
While the robbers were ransacking the apartment, I believe Honey walked in. And when she turned to leave, that's when she was shot.
When she turned to leave?
Yes.
So you think she was trying to get out of there when she was shot?
Yes.
Honey's mother and sister do not agree with this. They think she knew a secret about a narcotics deal and that she was targeted, lured to that apartment, and murdered by her best friends, whom she had gone to spend with that evening.
So you think this whole home invasion robbery theory is what?
A setup to make it look like it was a robbery so they can get off. And they're like, oh, she knows too much. We need to kill her. I really think this was a setup.
Now the question is, was she an innocent victim who accidentally walked in on a home invasion in progress, or was she silenced because she knew too much about a narco deal?
You've been clutching a photo the whole time.
Yeah, all of her little photos. That was my baby sister. She was my first baby before my babies. I miss her so much.
Honey Malone was an 18-year-old girl who lived with her mom, Flora, in Stone Mountain, Georgia. Her passion for fashion was more than just a hobby. It was a part of who she was. This love led her to her first job at a trendy clothing store, where she could be surrounded by the latest styles every day. When she was just a little girl, Honey decided that her given name, Vanessa Marie Malone, was too ordinary for her vibrant spirit. So she chose the name Honey because it was as sweet and unique as she was.
How did she end up with the nickname Honey?
She actually told me Vanessa Marie was plain for her. I should have gave her a more exotic name. So she wanted to be called Honey.
Honey was the kind of person who lit up a room. Her heart was big, and her kindness knew no bounds. From a young age, she had a gentle touch and a caring nature that made everyone feel loved. Whether it was a warm hug or a friendly kiss on the cheek, Honey never missed a chance to show her affection.
She was actually the sweetest little girl you've ever met. I mean, she was the type that went and kissed everybody good night and never had a bedtime.
As she grew up, Honey's energy seemed to know no limits. She was always the first to suggest an adventure or a get-together with friends. Her positive attitude was infectious, and she carried a joy that spread to everyone around her. She was like a ray of sunshine, always bright and cheerful. Honey had a sister named Cassandra, and together with their mother, Flora, they shared a strong bond. Even though it seemed like it was just the three of them against the world, they had each other, and that was enough.
What do you miss most about your sister?
I miss her little high energy self. Just her voice, how she is. I wish she was here so she can see my son.
You see, Honey wasn't just kind-hearted, she was also stunningly beautiful. With her curly locks, sparkling green eyes, and a sense of style that was all her own, she turned heads wherever she went.
She had beautiful eyes. She had green eyes. I was jealous.
And she had some striking eyes.
Green eyes. And her eyes told everything about her. They would actually twinkle.
She loved to play with makeup, experimenting with bold eyeshadow colors, and staying on top of the latest trends. Back in 2012, when snapbacks were all the rage, Honey was right there, setting trends of her own. Honey's bubbly personality drew people to her like bees to honey. She had many friends and was the life of every party, but not all the people she attracted were good for her. She also mingled with very bad people. And when I say very bad people, I mean narco dealers and criminals.
Tell me about the group that your sister was hanging out with.
From what I hear, they were cool, but they also did extra activities at their house.
From my investigation, the apartment was very busy. People went in and out of the apartment. The traffic was of high volumes, so it could have been many, many more.
And when you say there was a lot of traffic in and out of the apartment, is that because they were selling drugs out of there?
Yes, ma'am.
Nevertheless, Honey remained social and outgoing, always looking forward to the next gathering or night out. But unfortunately, the bad eggs she kept around her would eventually lead to her tragic death.
How's it been for you without her?
It's hard. Because I think about her all the time.
It all started on the evening of October 23rd, 2012, when Honey was wrapping up her shift at the clothing store where she worked. Once she was set to go, her mother, Flora, arrived to pick her up as she usually did. During their drive home, Honey couldn't stop talking about how tired she was. She made it clear that all she wanted was to dive into bed and call it a night. But once they reached home, Honey's plans took a sudden turn. Instead of heading to bed, she decided to go out and see her friends. Her mother, Flora, found this very strange because Honey usually sticks to her plans, especially when she is tired. Nevertheless, Flora watched Honey leave, only to have her return moments later to tell her mother how much she loved her.
So you knew where Honey was going and what she was going to do?
Well, she didn't really say where she was going. Then she came back in like 2 minutes or 3 minutes. And I'm like, oh, okay. She said, no, I just wanted you to know that I love you and I'll be right back.
This was a sweet gesture, but it was unusual for Honey to come back just for that.
She had to walk all the way around our place to come and tell me how much she loved me, and it's like, where is this coming from? I mean, not that she didn't say I love you all the time, but it was just weird. Something was just strange.
It was as though she knew she wouldn't be getting the opportunity to say those words to her mom ever again. Anyway, after professing her love, Honey left again, making the short walk to her friend's apartment, which was on the same street as her own house. Soon after Honey left, Flora's instincts kicked in, telling her something was wrong, but she tried to brush it off as nothing. However, she soon heard loud bangs outside that sounded like fireworks, and that was when she picked up her phone and tried calling Honey, but her phone was off, which was a bit strange to Flora. Even though Honey sometimes turned off her phone to save the battery, she hadn't used her phone while at work all day, and it should have been charged. Anyway, Flora's worry grew when she heard sirens and saw emergency vehicles speeding down the street towards where Honey had gone to see her friends. At this point, she tried calling Honey again, but still couldn't reach her. So, she then called her other daughter, Cassandra, to express her fears. But while she was still on the phone with Cassandra, someone knocked on the door. It was late, around 11:30 p.m., and when Flora opened the door, she saw Honey's ex-boyfriend, Da Kevin, and his friend, Chris. With the look on their faces, Flora instantly knew they were bearers of bad news, and she was right, because they came to break the news that the banging sounds she had heard earlier were not actually fireworks. They were gunfires, and the victim was none other than her beloved daughter, Honey. Without wasting a second, Flora made her way down to the apartment complex where Honey had gone. She also immediately called Cassandra to break the news to her and asked her to hurry over. But by the time they arrived, the area had been sealed off as a crime scene. There were ambulances and multiple law enforcement officers all over the place. But when Flora and Cassandra tried to get information from them, they couldn't say much about the situation. All Flora wanted to know was if her daughter was okay, and she gave the officers all the details she could about Honey, her appearance, what she was wearing, and even the unique tattoo on her left hand. But the officers couldn't confirm anything. The wait was unbearable until finally, at 2:15 a.m., the police confirmed the worst. They had found Honey's body in the apartment.
I think she walked in on a drug deal that went bad.
It was a dope house.
Is that all they sold in there?
We believe they sold on cocaine.
The wheels of justice began to turn swiftly as a murder investigation was launched into the tragic death of Honey. As you would expect, the investigators started by interviewing the friends whom Honey had gone to see in the apartment on that dreadful night. Now, this group this Honey associated with were criminals, for lack of a better word. Their rap sheets were littered with offenses involving possession and use of firearms and drugs. The house where they lived, which was where Honey was murdered, wasn't just any apartment. It was a hotspot for narcotics deals and and other shady businesses. These friends were an odd mix of teenage girls and older guys who were rappers by the day and notorious criminals by night. Among them were these three main guys: Spoon, Yak, and Mercy. Honey was very close to this trio, and sometimes she even helped them record their music video on camera in their apartment. This apartment belonged to Mercy and Yak, though Yak wasn't there that night when the tragic incident happened. Instead, it was just Mercy and another unidentified girl. According to Mercy and this girl, a group of armed hooded guys stormed into the apartment that night to rob them. They tied up Mercy and this other girl and locked them in the bathroom while they tore the place apart, looking for valuables to steal. Suddenly, they heard the sound of gunfire from the living room, but they didn't know it was Honey who had been gunned down because, at this time, they were still tied up in the bathroom, and they thought it was only the both of them and the robbers in the apartment. Honey was fired twice, once in the back and once in the chest. One of these bullets had actually pierced all the way through her heart, ending her life almost instantly. Now, the prevailing theory that explains this whole scenario was that Honey had inadvertently stumbled upon an armed robbery in progress. So, in a state of panic, the armed robbers fired at her once, and when she turned to flee, they pulled the trigger again.
I believe it was a home invasion robbery with the main purpose to steal the drugs and the money out of that apartment. While the robbers were ransacking the apartment, I believe Honey walked in. And when she turned to leave, that's when she was shot.
When she turned to leave?
Yes.
So you think she was trying to get out of there when she was shot?
Yes.
Now, you should know that this is just a theory the investigators came up with, and it remains unconfirmed because there were no eyewitnesses. The only two witnesses to the alleged robbery, Mercy and the other lady, were still tied up in the bathroom, and according to them, they did not see the events unfold. Meanwhile, after Honey was gunned down, her lifeless body was dragged across the apartment, leaving behind a harrowing trail of red stains on the hallway carpet, the dining room, and finally, the master bedroom, where her body was dumped on a pile of dirty clothes in the closet. The investigators were now tasked with piecing together the puzzle of that fateful night, a puzzle that would reveal the perpetrator of this heinous crime. But as they tried to solve the case, all clues and evidence seemed to point towards the robbery gone wrong narrative. Firstly, the investigators found some huge muddy shoe prints outside the apartment, which also matched the ones inside the apartment and on the kicked-in door. Now, we all know that this kind of thing can be staged to mislead the investigators. Nevertheless, the authorities still found some droplets of red bodily fluids not belonging to Honey outside the apartment, which meant that someone else was injured in that incident. Now, the question is, whose bodily fluid was that? A neighbor told the investigators that they had seen the assailants fleeing the scene. This neighbor said that one of them was limping, while another was assisting him into a van in the parking lot, which could very well have been their escape vehicle.
We talked to a neighbor that saw the suspects leave the apartment. There was a confrontation in the parking lot, and he believes that one of the suspects was shot in the leg because his buddy was helping him into the car.
With this information, the investigators contacted every hospital in the vicinity and beyond, extending their search throughout the state of Georgia and even Atlanta. Their goal was to find someone seeking treatment for a leg injury consistent with a bullet wound. However, no hospital reported such a case. The absence of these medical records suggested two possibilities. Either the injured party avoided professional medical care, or the individual simply did not exist, and the bodily fluids found outside the apartment were part of an elaborate plan to deceive the investigators.
We followed up with all the hospitals in the Atlanta metro area and surrounding counties. Nobody came in that night or the next day with a gunshot wound to the leg. So the suspect either traveled out of state or he just had it fixed by a neighborhood doctor.
Either way, only time will tell.
But who would want to kill Honey?
That is the million-dollar question because I can't think of anything. She's a 100-pound teenager. She didn't drive a car. She didn't have anything to steal. What could have she known?
Honey's family, like many of us, believe that the theory of Honey walking into an armed robbery by accident and getting killed wasn't the whole truth. They think there's more to the story, especially since the investigators didn't find anything missing from the apartment. It was as if the robbers broke in, but forgot to take anything. Or perhaps the supposed robbers had other reasons for breaking into the house, and stealing something was definitely not part of it, because how could they have left without taking anything? Or could it be that they actually took something something from the apartment that Mercy and the other lady were hiding from the investigators. Now let's pause for a moment and think about it. If the robbers had taken something they shouldn't have, like narcotics or unregistered firearms, would they really report those kinds of items missing? Of course not, because that would be them firing themselves in the foot. So, perhaps they told the investigators nothing was taken from the apartment because they couldn't exactly report illegal items missing. The only thing that seemed to be missing from the crime scene was Honey's phone, but even that was found dumped not too far from where she was murdered.
We tracked her cell phone after the murder to a location about a half mile away where it stayed there until it died.
So how did Honey's cell phone end up half a mile away?
It was stolen during the incident.
Why would they take her cell phone? They've already killed her. What do they need her cell phone for? Thinking that maybe she could call for help?
No, they're just easy to resell on the street.
Now, let's talk about the stories of Mercy and this other girl in the apartment on the night of the murder. Surprisingly, the duo can't seem to agree on what actually happened that night. One of them said the robbers were 3 in number, and the other claimed they were 5 or 6. Now that's a very huge difference. And then there's the matter of how they were tied up. One said it was with a belt, and the other said they were tied up with an electrical cord. Those two materials feel pretty different, so it's strange they don't remember the same thing. Everyone who has looked at the case finds it all very odd. For instance, why did the robbers drag Honey's body to a closet? In most robberies where things go south, the bad guys want to get out fast. They don't usually hang around, especially not to hide a body in a place where it'll definitely be found. They knew everyone heard the gunfire, so why not run? Why waste time moving Honey? It's all very mysterious and doesn't add up, and Honey's family strongly suspects that she was tricked into going to that apartment by someone she knew well. They wondered if Honey had stumbled upon a secret, seen something she wasn't meant to see, or if someone wanted her silenced because of a disagreement.
Why don't you believe that she walked into a robbery?
I believe that they thought she knew something or saw something and was worried that she was going to tell. She wouldn't just walk into a kicked-in door to see what happened. That's not her.
Honey's sister, Cassandra, also found Mercy's account of events hard to believe. She couldn't understand why Mercy, known for his rough past and quick temper, didn't defend himself during the alleged incident. This, too, didn't add up. Mercy claimed that after he and the other girl were tied up in the bathroom, they were too scared to move until they sensed that the robbers had left. But Cassandra kept questioning why this time was different, why Mercy didn't fight back like he usually would.
I don't think that the story that they gave the police is accurate.
They don't think so either.
You're a thug. How you sell drugs? You got all these weapons and you scared? You scared to untie yourself and you scared you had to wait until these 3 to 6 men left before you untied yourself and the girl with you?
The family was also confused about the robbers' motives. If it was a robbery gone wrong, why harm only Honey and leave Mercy and the other girl who also witnessed the whole thing?
Why not kill all the witnesses? What's the difference? If you got one body on you, you might as well just take them all out.
But why shoot Honey?
Collateral damage. She saw more than what she needed to see. They were there to do a drug transaction, either buy some or to sell a large quantity of while in the midst of doing that drug transaction, Honey walked in and she saw too much.
None of these made any sense to Honey's family or the investigators, and as the days passed, their questions remained unanswered, leaving them with a heartbreaking mystery and the memory of Honey, a girl who brought light into their lives, now gone too soon. In the aftermath of Honey's death, Mercy and his gang found themselves at the center of a gripping crime investigation.
I would say a main person of interest in this case will be Mercy. Based on the statements that I've reviewed and the evidence that I've looked at, he was very deep into the dope gang. It seems like he ran the business out of that house.
But despite the strong suspicion that they had something to do with Honey's death, not a shred of concrete evidence could pin the crime on them. No fingerprint evidence, no DNA, no nothing. As the days turned into weeks, the investigators followed every lead they had, but, as fate would have it, the trail went cold. So they had to stop looking because they had nothing to go on.
Did the drugs and the money belong to Mercy?
I believe so.
So Mercy probably knows who was out to get him.
Probably.
And that same person might be the person who killed Honey.
probably.
So even if there had been an actual robbery in that apartment that night, the authorities believe that Mercy knew who the robbers were and what they came for. In other words, if there were secrets to be spilled, Mercy held the key. He could have pointed the investigators in 1,000 different directions to solve this case, but he never cooperated with them. But in a sudden twist of fate, Mercy and his flatmate, Yak, were later arrested, but not for Honey's murder. Mercy was charged with illegal firearms possession and a host of other crimes that got him about 12 months in prison. Yak, on the other hand, was imprisoned for a few months for drug-related charges and evidence tampering. 7 long years passed without any progress on Honey's case. For her family, those years felt like an eternity, filled with unanswered questions about why their beloved Honey had been taken from them and who was responsible. Then, in a twist of fate, an unrelated firearms arrest in 2019 cracked open the case again.
Really? So this could be a break in the case?
Yeah, it could be a big break. We know who the gun belongs to, so if it comes back as a match, we're almost there.
Where did you find this new gun?
One of the people that identified as being a person of interest in this case was arrested with a firearm. It is a 9mm, which we had 9mm shell casings at the scene. So we're just hoping that it might match.
When the seized gun was tested, it was revealed to be the very weapon used to end Honey's life 7 years earlier.
Would this have been a bullet that killed Honey or a bullet that was found within that gun battle?
It was found within the gun battle, so we could associate that shell casing with being at the scene, but we don't know what exactly killed Honey.
The gun's owner was none other than Mercy, whose real name is Donald Ash. Mercy was then arrested in April 2020 and charged with second-degree murder in the death of Honey Malone. Following his arrest, the investigators started to connect the dots between Mercy and Honey's case again. This time, they collected Mercy's DNA sample and tested it against the DNA that was found in front of Mercy's apartment on the day of the murder. Surprisingly, both DNA matched. It is puzzling why they hadn't tested this DNA against Mercy's DNA earlier. They had actually checked it against a database of criminals who had been arrested for violent crimes, but Mercy wasn't on that data at the time. But it made no sense why they didn't get a sample from Mercy back then, since he was the prime suspect in the case. Anyway, Honey's family were at least happy that an arrest had been made, and they were eagerly waiting for justice to take its course, but things would not go as they expected. In April 2020, Mercy faced a series of 4 bond hearings. During his initial court appearance, the judge denied any bond. Subsequently, a bond was set with the condition that he would remain under house arrest, but by his final hearing, the terms were modified, allowing Mercy limited freedom. He could leave his residence for up to 12 hours daily, provided he wore an ankle monitor. With that, Mercy's bond was set at $80,000 under the conditions that he wear an ankle monitor and stay at home unless he needed to visit his attorney, go to a doctor, or for any religious purposes. On August 16th, Mercy secured his release from jail by posting the bond amount. Since then, there have been no further developments in setting a trial date for him, nor additional arrests, despite the investigators' earlier confidence in arresting more accomplices in the case. Meanwhile, a few months after Honey's murder, this couple, Orien and Tai Curry, purchased the same apartment in which Honey was murdered. The Currys moved in, excited to start their new life. But as they arranged their furniture, they stumbled upon a mysterious red trail on the carpet. It led straight to the closet, and it was impossible to miss. So, they reached out to their landlord, asking about the strange mark.
There was all kind of trails of blood from the front door all the way through the dining room, all the way through the hallway where it stopped in our closet.
The landlord brushed it off, saying it was just some spilled fruit juice left by the last tenant. But Orien and Tai weren't convinced. The stain was too large, too continuous. It looked more like the aftermath of something being dragged rather than a simple spill. Tai, especially, couldn't shake off the feeling that it might be blood. This was an area known for crime, and the thought lingered in her mind. So, determined to find the truth, Tai bought some peroxide. You see, peroxide has a special reaction with blood. It bubbles and foams. When she applied it to the stain, and sure enough, it fizzed up, confirming their worst fears. Their new dream home was a crime scene. This revelation was so much that the Currys packed up and left as fast as they could, upset that the landlord hadn't told them about the apartment's dark past.
Once we found out that the stains were actually blood, we immediately called the leasing office. We told them we pulled up the fact that a murder happened in our apartment, and we asked them why no one had told us.
However, they later learned that in Georgia, where they lived, Landlords aren't required to disclose such details unless you ask about a specific incident. So, unless you know exactly what to ask, you might end up living in a house with a hidden history, just like they did. Meanwhile, the investigation into Honey's murder continues, and the authorities are offering a $50,000 reward for any information or evidence that would help convict her killers.
There's a $50,000 reward for information that leads to the arrest and conviction of Honey Malone's killer or killers. If you know anything, you can call anonymously to Crime Stoppers Atlanta at 1-404-577-TIPS.
Do you really think that this family will ever get justice for their little angel, Honey Malone? Please feel free to share your thoughts on this case with us in the comments below. And if you have enjoyed this video, please give it a thumbs up and don't forget to subscribe to our channel for more videos like this.